Welcome! Today I will show you how you can turn something like this into something like this. Something like this into something like this. Something like this into something like this. I have a lot of pots to glaze. I just emptied the kiln from a bisque fire. And as you probably experienced yourself, you can have a lot more in there when you bisque fire because you can stack it, put it inside each other. And then when you glaze fire, there's a lot less room because of course it can't touch each other. So I have in general about 1.5 kiln full of glazing for every kiln full of bisque. I have a lot of different pots that I want to glaze today. I have some big fermenting crocks. This one is made with reclaimed clay, so I'm never exactly sure how my glaze will react to it, but I have some really stable glazes that I think will be good. This one turned out really, really nice. A big one. I also have a lot of these small bowls, and they're so super nice. They came out really, really light and nice. I think that's nice for a bowl when you hold it, and this is just a few 100 grams. And it's got a very nice curve inside and a nice foot. And the foot not only serves a visual purpose, I like a pot like this to have a foot, but also when you're glazing them, it's a wonderful thing to hold on to, because that way you can just dip it and hold on to it. Because I'm not going to glaze the foot ring. It depends a little bit on the kind of glaze you have. If you have a glaze that is not running at all, you could glaze the foot if you want to. My glazes are not actually running, but I like to keep the foot in a different color, sort of a contrast to the glaze. And this particular glaze is one of my favorite glaze. High iron, as you can probably see. There's a lot of iron in it. And this is the bisque fire. When it's glaze fired, it turns even more dark. This is a bowl that I made. There's some slip on the inside, some white slip. But on the outside, you can see here, the bottom, there's no glaze here. There's glaze here. It turns a little bit darker, but here it's a dark red. And I think it's wonderful. It almost looks like earthenware, but it's not. It is stoneware. So for this pot with a glaze on top and then keeping that very dark foot rim here, I think that's going to be really nice. These bowls I will try and glaze a little similar to what I showed you a couple of times ago when I was doing re-glazing of pots. Although it will be difficult to get exactly the same, but I mean, one of my favorites is this one. I think I can show a picture. I think it turned out wonderful. And that's actually a combination of two glazes and one of my favorite new additions, this baked wool powder. I'll get back to that when we use it. I also have some bigger bowls like this that I'll also glaze with a nice texture on the outside. I think that would be wonderful. This is something that I would usually spray glaze, but because it's so cold outside now, I won't be able to do that. I don't have a spray booth inside. I don't have room for that. So I spray outside, and I can't do that when it's too windy or when it's too cold, because when it's almost freezing, it doesn't go well with the glaze. And now it's windy and freezing, so it's terrible. So I will actually use a different method of glazing these, because it can be a bit of a challenge. Inside, you can pour it around, pull it out, but what about the outside? I'll show you that. I also have the bamboo vase that I did a couple of videos ago, and some of you were asking, couldn't you show us how you finalize it, how you glaze a pot like this? So I will do that. I also have some plates. You remember I did my first plate not that long ago, and they were not so big. And so I decided to make some that are a little bigger. This is more like a dinner plate. It's the same design with a very small flange, and have a little bit of a texture in there, like a swirl, which will be evened out a little bit with the kind of glaze I will be using. and these are a little bit bigger. I like the ones, but I like food, so they're a bit too small for my dinner. So this one I think will be better. I only made 3 of them because I want to test out how it goes. I also have, let me just take them here. I have a bunch of porcelain plates. I also work in a different studio where one of Denmark's finest potters and expert in porcelain is trying to help me get better with that. And I did these, and this is like the first size, and this is the second. So you can see they're quite a lot bigger. Usually I would only glaze porcelain with a clear glaze. That's the only glaze we use. We have some oxides, of course, and some stuff, but we basically do everything in the clear glaze to keep this porcelain white and nice. But I actually do like colors. And so I did a test using my stoneware colors, stoneware glazes. I mean, I call them stoneware glazes because that's primarily what they're made for, but I mean, some of them you can use for porcelain as well. So I tried using them, and it actually turned out really, really nice. And even though I don't fire as high as you normally would with porcelain, functionally, I tested it. It works. It goes in the dishwasher. It's theoretically, it's probably not fully vitrified, but since there's glaze all over where you keep the food, I think it's okay. So I will try them with some of my other stoneware glazes. And now talking about glazing bowls. One of the reasons I didn't do plates, is that when you glaze fire plates, they take up an awful lot of space in the kiln. So I got some of these. These are special kiln shelves. I got them from vase in Germany, but I think other suppliers have similar ones. I just like the design of these so much. So basically, it's a shelf like this that can fit a plate. And this one can actually fit up to almost 30 centimeters, so quite big dinner plates. Then you can add a plate like this, and you can add the next one, and you can add a plate like this, and you can add the last one. Well, I think you get the picture. So why do I do this? Well, because these plates are almost 30 centimeters, and my kiln is only 55 or something in the width. So I can only have 2 on a shelf. And then, of course, I can add a shelf very close to it and add 2 more. But because they're so low, I won't be able to add anything else to utilize the space, not even a mug or cup or anything. So I will waste a lot of space. By using these, I can stack them up. Let me just take the other one here. I can stack them up like this and maybe have 3, 4, maybe even 5 plates like this. And now I can put this in the middle of my kiln, and there will be some space around it. So I can put some bowls or cups or small pitchers or whatever around, and that way I can utilize the space in my kiln much better. So I'm looking forward to use that. I think I could probably stack maybe 5 of them, and then I could have one of the fermenting crocks next to it. So I'm looking forward to start using that. The first thing I do before I even start thinking about glazing is I look through all my pots to see if they are smooth and even, if there's nothing that sticks out that shouldn't stick out. And for this one, there was a little bit inside. Just, I think when I trimmed it, I left something. I shouldn't have done that, but now it's there. But don't worry, you can still clean that up. I can, usually just use normal sandpaper for that. I know a lot of times when I do this stuff, people complain in the comments, say, you didn't use a mask and you didn't protect yourself. And true, sometimes I don't, and I know I should. So this time I will, just to demonstrate that I actually do have a mask. And it's a good idea to protect yourself. It is indeed. I need to take my glasses off. So, it's turning the wrong way. So, like this. Of course, now you can't hear me, but this is a high quality protection. It takes dust and gases, acid gases and chloral fumes and everything. So also use it for pit fire. So putting this on, then you can grind the pot. But you can't hear, almost can't hear what I'm saying, I guess. So this way. I already did most of the grinding before I started this video, so this one is good now. Of course, you have to be extra careful when you clean a pot before you glaze it, because now there's a lot of dust. And if you leave that dust, the glaze won't attach. It'll just fall off at places. So you need to keep that in mind. But I will wash the pots before I glaze anyway. So now we're almost ready to glaze, but not entirely. Because for some of the pots, like this one, the bowls, as I told you, I don't want the rim, the foot rim to be glazed. I could just dip it like this and make sure I don't get too much there and wipe it off with a sponge. But I like to use wax. There are two kinds of wax. There's the one that you leave on to fire, and that's perfect for this use. There's also the pull-off wax. It's going to create this sort of a rubber surface, so you can do some painting. You can take it off. That's good when you want to do it to create patterns of colors and maybe multiple layers. So you put something on, you paint, and you take it off, and you put some other paints on. But for this purpose, the wax resist is perfect, and it burns off during the fire. So I will go upstairs and apply that. It's much easier to do on the wheel. For waxing my pots, I found that this pink sort of colored wax is really useful. You can get them in other colors too and other brands. It's not so important. And if you don't have a colored wax, you can also just apply food coloring, because food coloring is just going to burn away. But the great thing about this colored wax is that it's much easier to see where you actually waxed. And that can sometimes be a challenge with the transparent ones. So I'm going to apply this to my pots here. One important thing to remember when you apply the wax is that even though I like to keep my pots inside each other like this, once you apply the wax to the bottom, you cannot do that, because the wax is going to rub off on the surface of the other pot, in this case plates, and then the glaze won't stick. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the wax. So once you wax them, you can still stack them, but stack them wax to wax. That's very important. As some of these pots, like the plates, are almost too big to fit in between the pins I have, I put on a bat, so that way I can easily move them around. For this application, I will put the wax just a few millimeters under where it touches the table, because I only want that part not glazed. My glaze is not running, so I trust that. So I want the glaze to go all the way down to here, and then when you put it on the table, it will look like it's glazed all the way down. So the first thing I need to do is have it centered as well as possible. And of course, if you know tap centering, that's probably a faster way to do it. But this works okay for me. So now it's centered, and the wax is ready to use out of the box here. Be very careful when you work with this, because if you drip anything, if you drip wax on areas where you want the glaze, it's almost impossible to remove it again. So be very careful. I like to keep it over the area that I need to wax anyway. So that was my edge, and now I'll just wax the inner part. It doesn't need to be that thick, but even if it's a little bit lumpy, or the areas where there's a little more wax. It doesn't matter. It dries up pretty quickly. And since I'm going to do a lot of pots, they will have time to dry. And of course, it needs to be completely dry before you add it to, or dip it in your glaze or spray it or whatever you do. So that's it. It's super fast. So now you see, you can see where the wax is, right? It goes down to about here. So when I dip this, which is what I will do with these, the glaze will sort of run off where the wax is. So, see, it's super fast. I wouldn't stack this just right now because I like it to dry before I do that. So I'm just going to leave it here and do my next one. And then after it dries and it's not sticky anymore, we can put them wax to wax. When applying the wax to the bowls, you have to consider if you want the glaze inside the foot or you just want it outside. In my case, because it's so deep here, I can have the glaze in there. So I'm just gonna wax the actual foot so that stands out. Also, you may consider if you have, like I do have here, a maker's mark in there. I'm also gonna wax that a little bit because I'm using a rather thick glaze and I don't want it floating in there too much. So the bowl. And with the bowl, you have to be even more careful because there's no place for the bottle to be to secure your dripping on areas that you don't want glaze on. So use very, very little wax on your brush and use a good brush that doesn't drip. And so now the last thing, I'll just apply a little bit of wax on my logo, my maker's mark. That way it should stand out a little bit better. So that's it. Waxing the fermenting crocks is a two-part process because there's a lid and there's the crock itself. And the lids, as you may recall from one of my previous videos, I'm actually glaze firing off the pots. So I'm glaze firing them separately. Some potters will tell you that's not good because they can warp in different directions and they won't fit. In my experience, with the kind of stoneware I'm using, that's not true. And the benefit of glazing them separately is that I can glaze this one all the way down. So it's only the bottom that's not glazed, and I can glaze the inside of this groove. And that's actually good because in this case, I'm going to put water in this. It's a water sealed pot for fermenting. I have some videos about that. So in this case, I can have the glaze all the way in here and this looks better. And of course, it's more water resistant. So let's put the pot aside. So for this, I only need the wax on the surface that's actually gonna stand on in the kiln, because of course I can't have glaze there. But that's gonna be hidden. When you put it in here, you won't see that part. So it will look like the whole pot is glazed. And I like that. So we're just gonna do this. Again, be careful. You have to know if your glaze is runny or not. In my case, the glaze I'm using is not running at all, so I can go all the way down. So that's going to be good. So the fermenting pot itself, I will glaze inside and out, but of course I won't be glazing the bottom. So we need to wax that. And as you can see, I hope you can see it here, I also have a maker's mark on that. but I do want glaze inside. But I only want the wax to cover the foot, and just, you can see I have a bevel sort of shape here. So when I want to apply the wax out here, so again, because the bevel makes it look like it's floating a little bit, so it will look like when it's standing on the table that the entire pot is glazed, even though I have a few millimeters reserved here. So sort of my safety, if the glaze should run just a little bit. Again, you really have to know your glazes, because if you don't, and you apply it this far down as I do, it may run and stick to the kiln, and well, potentially you could ruin your pot. So for the bamboo vase, it's a lot easier because I want it glazed fully inside out, except of course for the button. The button is not it's not raised, it's not a trim button, it's just a flat button. So again, I have, as maybe you can see, a small bevel. So I cut a very small bevel here. It's only, what is it, 3-4 millimeters. So the button and down to here, I want to wax. Everything else will be glazed. Last but not least, my bigger bowls. It's basically the same. They are made to exactly fit my bed, so they're 35.5 centimeter wide. In case of a wider, I do have some super big beds here, like 55 centimeter, I think they are. I could use that, but they fit just for this. I'm going to do the same thing here, just apply the wax to the foot and just a couple of millimeters down the side. Because especially with a shallow bowl like this, you won't actually see that last part down there, the last few millimeters. So it will look like it's glazed all the way down, even though it's not. It's sort of a magic trick, but it works wonders. And it does secure your kiln's shells in case it did run just a little bit. But you won't actually see this part. It's the beauty of this way of glazing. So, and the maker's mark. So that's it. I have a few more pots to wax, but I think you grabbed the concept. So next thing up, we will clean the pots and glaze them. Remember, when you're done with the waxing, to clean your brush and do it fast. Don't let it lie there for several minutes, hours, because then it will stick and you won't be able to get it off. Wash them now. A really fast and easy way to glaze my plate is to dip them. But of course, when you're dipping, there will be some areas that won't be glazed. So what I found is that by holding it like this, 2 fingers here, 1 finger here, I can put it in the bucket and up this way. That way, all of the plate will have an equal amount of time in the glaze. So the application will be equal. The other thing is that even though I did wax the button, some glaze will still stick there, even though I will try and shake it off. So to take away most of it, I took this, was a cleaning cloth or something. I just damped it so it's not soaking wet, and I'm putting it here flat on the table. So as always, make sure that your glaze is well mixed. I just stirred it a lot, so now it's fine. There's no lumps in it or anything. So now I'm ready to do the first one, and hold it like this, and 1 finger here, and down, and up, and shaking it. And as you see, a lot of the glaze at the bottom is going away, but not all of it. But it's very easy to remove. So let's try and see how my protection here works. See, almost all of it is gone. So I'm going to put this on some newspapers over here and let it dry a little bit. Before I do the next one, I'll just clean this, dip it in my water, and now it's ready for another one. These plates are almost too big for this bucket. In case your plates are too big, you can put it in another bucket that doesn't need to be that deep, so you can just take a wider one. Look, I still need to remove a little bit with a sponge, but it's a good start. For my big fermenting crock, I'll first glaze it on the inside, which is easy enough because I'm just going to pour some glaze in it. Just mixing my glaze to be sure it's fine. Pour some glaze inside, shake it around a little bit, and pour it out again. I'll just let it drip a little bit. I want to make sure that there's no excess glaze in there. Be careful when you do this. You don't want to drop it. Yeah, it actually looks really good. It's hard to see in the video, even if I try to film inside, but it's a nice and even layer. So far, so good. Then it's time to glaze the outside. As I said, I would usually spray glaze a pot like this because it's easier. It's a big surface, and but it's rainy, it's freezing, it's windy. I can't spray glaze outside, so I have to do this in a different way. Glazing the lid is quite easy. It's I use a tongue and make sure to hold on to a good spot, and then I just make a dip because, as you remember, we put the wax here on the edge, so that should be sort of protected, not completely, but hold on enough not to drop it, but not so much that you you squeeze through it, which can happen if it's a very thin pot. Need to hold it until it's dry enough to release it. So that was a little bit dramatic, but it's a strong one. It's not super thin, so if it's very thin, be a little more careful than I just was. It's so, I mean, it happened to me that you worked this long time making your pot and it's all perfect and everything, and then at the final stage, just before putting it into the kiln for glazing, you break it. I hate that. For the second part of the glazing, on the outside of this big fermenting crock, I just got this big bucket of plastic, and I have a banding wheel, and to raise it a little bit, I just took a bucket. Could be anything. So now we have something turning around here, and we can place the pot on top of this. And then we can turn it around and pour the glaze on it. And this, theoretically, should work okay. So let's try out and see how it goes. think that's pretty good. I'm just going to let it dry there a little bit. And then, of course, there will be a little more cleaning to do because we need to empty the glaze that's running down here, put it back in the bucket. And of course, this needs to be super clean as well. You don't want to pollute your glaze with anything. But I think this is going to work out good. There's some areas I didn't get glazed because it's going in. So of course the glaze is like dripping off here. So I need to apply the rest of it with a brush, I think. Also, I can see there's a few areas here that doesn't have enough glaze. Just take some of it from down here. Yeah, I think that's better. I can take the sponge and clean up the edge. So we get a clean edge on the bevel I was talking about. And now I need to decide if I want glaze here inside or not. I think actually I'm not going to glaze it here. I'm just going to leave it like that for this pot. So just going to let it dry a little bit. Then I'm going to turn it around and clean it up. Now it's dry enough to touch on the sides. And sure enough, there's some areas here that didn't get glazed well enough this way because it goes in so much here. So I will have to fix that with a brush, I think. And I think that's going to go okay. I failed. I do that a lot because I experiment a lot and I do things in new ways. And when you do that a lot, you will fail a lot. I'm not too proud to admit it. I failed. But a good thing about failing so much is that I also learn how to fix my failures. And in this case, it didn't turn out quite the way I wanted. It's maybe difficult to see in the video, but the application of the glaze was not as even as I would like it to. Even though this glaze is okay if it's not totally even because it just changes color a little bit, and that's actually good. But the problem is it got a little bit too drippy at some areas, and some areas it was so thick that it actually flaked off a little bit. That's not so good. So the first thing I did was I used this scraper and I scraped off some of the dripping areas where it was too thick. And then I used my finger and just rubbed it a little bit to get these thick areas cleaned up a little bit more, and to make sure that, I mean, it's still not completely even, but after I did this all over the pot, it's even enough that I think it will be good. So if it fails again and it turns out not as I like it, I can just re-glaze. As you remember, I did a video about re-glazing, and sometimes it's actually even better. So maybe I should hope for that. I don't know. No, I hope it will turn out well. I did clean it up, the bottom completely. So now I have this beautiful, wow, what it is, 3 or 4 millimeter bevel. And I think that's going to look good when it stands on the table. Of course, all the things I rubbed off, I put back into the bucket. It's just the dried glaze. So the only thing left now is there's a few areas here where it flaked off, and I'll just dip my finger and just slightly add a little bit there, and then I'm going to leave that. You can use this technique, which I'm also going to use on the plates that we can get back to in a second. Just put your finger in the glaze and you sort of just tap it with the glaze. Don't try and paint it on, just tap it slightly. And of course, depending on what glaze you have, that's usually enough to just cover the areas that that flaked off. So I think that's good enough for now. But with this failure in mind, I don't think I'm going to do the rest of my fermenting crocks the same way. I will have to spray paint them. It's still a little bit cold outside, but it's not freezing. It's still a little bit too windy, but it's not raining. So I think I can find a corner outside where I can protect the pots a little bit from the wind and still do spraying. At least that's what I'm going to do with the remaining 3 of them. The lids, of course, I can just dip. I will do that. But before I do that, let's look at the plates and do the last cleaning before they're ready to fire. With the plates, there's also a little bit of unevenness. You can usually just move your finger over the glaze and make sure that it's even. By doing that, you kind of rub off any of the edges that might have happened. You can rub off some of the drips, and you will fill out any holes with the remaining dust that you rub away. So doing that, I think, in my experience, turns out a much better glaze. If there's any drips left, there's a few on this, you can use jacket edge scraper like this, and just slightly, just be careful, don't go too deep, just scrape it a little bit, and then rub your finger, and then that will even it out. And again, like the other one, remember to save the glaze dust, because you can put that back into the bucket. The other part we want to do, I need my bucket here again, is that because we dipped it, there's 3 finger marks. Here's 1, and there should be 2 on the other side, but apparently only 1 of them made it through. So we have to fill that out. And we're going to do that the same way we did with the fermenting crock, just dipping my finger and just lightly dipping it here on the edge. That's usually enough. Same thing on the other side. Again, it depends a little bit on the type of glaze, but this glaze floats really well. So that's good enough. The last thing left is to clean the bottom. Even though the glaze didn't completely drip off when I dipped it from the waxed areas, it's a lot easier to remove now that it's waxed than if it was on the pure bisqueware, because it doesn't really soak into the pot, so it just sits on the surface of that wax. So you see, it goes on off really easy. I need to clean the sponge a few times, but you see, it's very easy to clean it. So first I want to clean the bottom completely, and I mean completely. You don't want any traces of glaze there, because that's going to stick to your shelves. So, and then I want to clean the edge, because remember I put wax down about a couple of millimeters on that bevel to just make sure that it looks like it will be glazed all the way down, but in reality there's like a couple of millimeters. But when you view the plate on the table, it will look like the entire flange is glazed. It's a little bit of magic. It pays off to spend some time on this. The more perfect your edges are, and the cleaning and scrubbing and everything, the more perfect and beautiful it looks in the end. So it is a bit of extra work, but when I started glazing, I was rushing things, and I didn't want to spend the time doing all this, but I do that now, and I think in general I get much better results out of it. So spend the time. I mean, you spend so much time doing the pot and trimming it, and you spend time and money, not the least, to bisquify it. So so why not spend that extra few minutes to perfect your glazing? So I think I saw, yeah, that was the third finger mark, and just gonna dip that. So now I think it looks good. I'll let it dry completely, and then I'll just, last time before I put it in the kiln, just check that I didn't miss any spots. But I think this is gonna be good. When I did this bamboo vase, one of the comments I got on the video was, it looks good, but how do you glaze it? And I'm glad you asked, because that is actually super easy with this one. First, I'm going to glaze it on the inside. And I'm going to use one of my favorite glazes again. Just going to look for some newspaper. Yeah, there we go. One of my favorite glazes, the Folk Art Gilt White. It's actually not so white. It's more like a brownish. Well, there's a picture of it here. It looks really good. It breaks nice over edges like this, and it's super easy to work with. And I have a fresh batch of it, and I just mixed that and sieved it, and it's ready to use. So first, I'm gonna fill up the vase like this, swirl it around a bit, and pour it out. It reacts very much to the thickness. So thick give one color, thin layers give another color. Experiment with it. It depends very much on the clay. It also reacts a lot to this clay because there's a lot of iron in it, and as you can see almost from the color, it is a clay or glaze with a lot of iron. So now it's glazed on the inside. I could of course spray this, but as I was just talking about, it's a little bit tricky now to spray. So instead, I'm going to pour it. And it's a lot easier than the fermenting crock with the difficult shape. So I'm going to put this on the floor because I need to have a little more distance. To pour the glaze on a pot like this, you need sort of an acrobatic exercise. You need to hold on to the very edge of it. And then if you turn your hand all the way around, then you can almost turn it a full circle like this. And that's what we need. So again, I'm gonna pour as much as I can, and then I turn it, and then I pour it on it. And don't be afraid of getting some glaze on the bottom. That's easy to remove. So, see, I got all the way around by twisting my arm like that. So now, I'll just let it drip a little bit, and I think I can touch the inside and turn it around. Now I'm just going to let it dry a little bit so I can easily touch it. And as you will see, and wash your hands, because this is a very high iron oxide glaze. And if you ever worked with iron oxide, it's a wonderful colorant, but it's also very vivid. It messes up everything. So you gotta have to keep things very clean when you work with that. Otherwise, suddenly you have it all over your place. So, like that. Another great thing about this glaze is that it dries pretty quickly. But now you can see where I hold my fingers. Of course, there's some areas where it didn't stick. However, that's pretty easy to fix. I still have some glaze left in my bucket. I'm just gonna not brush it, but kind of like splash it on. And again, don't be afraid there's too much glaze here, because we are of course gonna clean the bottom. So just like this, adding this. And now we have fine glaze all the way around. Maybe not. There's one spot over here. So, like that. So, you see now, we got it all filled out. So there's no empty spots, and it looks good inside. So now I'm just going to let it dry for a few moments, and after that I can clean the bottom. So of course make sure that the bottom is completely clean. And just like the other pots, I have this bevel, so a couple of millimeters all the way around that I don't want the glaze on. I really like this this design trick, you could say, of having this small bevel. The thing is, when you have it standing here on a table, it will look like it's floating a little bit, and you won't actually see that there's no glaze here. So it looks like the glaze go all the way down without the risk of damaging your kiln shelves or your pot, because it glues to the shelves. This way you get great glazing that looks like it's going all the way down without actually doing it, and it's very easy. And it's also, by having this bevel, sort of have like a guide for where to clean the glaze, so you get a very straight glaze line. That is, of course, if it's not a runny glaze. If it's very runny, then of course the bevel needs to be bigger. But this one is actually very stable. You can sort of press your finger into the bevel, the punch, and thereby getting this super clean cut. So you see, you can almost not see it like this, but of course when you look here, you can see it. So this is how to glaze a bamboo vase, or at least one way to do it. It works for me. As you remember, I did put the wax just on the edge here, just a few millimeters down on each side. So it will be very easy to clean and get this impression that it's glazed all over. After they dried a little bit, which they do really quickly with this glaze, it's a wonderful glaze. I'll put a link to the recipe. It's one of John Britt's glazes. Or actually, I don't know if he invented it, but I got it from his mid-range book, and it's just really nice glaze. Easy to work with and everything. And now, because I applied the wax, it's very easy to get a very clean glaze line here. So there you go. It's only very little that is not going to be glazed, but of course the very bottom, so I can put it on the shelf without fusing it into it. When you do this, always squeeze the sponge a lot, because actually, see, I dripped a little bit of water in there, but it's not so much. If it was a lot more, then yeah, well, I could destroy the application of the glaze, and of course I don't want that. Worst case, if you completely mess up glazing, you can wash it off or scrape it off. Leave it to dry and then do the glazing again. Now I'm ready for the remaining 3 fermenting crocks. And the inside I will do exactly the same way I did the other one. I'm going to pour it in, shake it around a little bit and pour it out. And then we will try and move outside to do the winter glaze spraying. I hope it goes well. This is my spray booth for the night. It is by far not very ideal, but I think it's going to work. And I'm desperate because I want to get this glazing finished, and I don't see any other way. I think it's going to work. I made the spray booth out of a cardboard box, moving box, put my bending wheel inside, put up a night light because it is 9-10 o'clock in the evening. I just want to finish this now. So I think it's going to work. I'm deliberately not making this very even because I get so many variations of the color when I spray it a little uneven, and so I really like that. So this is nice. I just need to clean the bottom a little bit. Well, despite the fact that this is far from an ideal, very far from an ideal spraying situation, I actually think it turned out very, very good. Yeah, I'm almost sort of surprised. But it's another good example. If you have a goal and you're stubborn enough, like me, or persistent, I think it's a better word, then you can always find solutions. And it is very windy. It is night. It is too cold. But I'm pretty sure that this application is good. We'll see in a couple of days. Now I just need to clean the bottom. It is almost clean. I just want to make sure. And then I can fill the kiln with the first layer with the fermenting pots and the bamboo vase. I didn't finish all the glazing yesterday. So now it's the next day, as you can probably see on my facial hair. I really do need a shave, but I'll get back to that. But the only thing I need to do now is the bowls. I have the small bowls and I have one of the bigger ones. And what I want to do with this is see if I can recreate the wonderful results I got with my re-glazing. I think there's a very good example of it here. It is a combination of 2 glazes and the steel wool powder that I made some videos ago. But in this one, I'm actually going to use 3 different glazes. So I hope it will turn out well. The base glaze, the first one we're going to use, is one of my all-time favorites, a variation of the Floating Blue. The Floating Blue Glaze is a wonderful glaze. I know a lot of people have problems using it. I don't. But one of the things is that there's a lot of Gursley Barrett in it, and that tend to gel up. And so you may need to defluctuate it using a little bit of sodium silicate over time. But what I also found is that if you whip it enough, it kind of lifts it up and it becomes much more fluid. I'm not 100% sure about the chemistry in this, but you can sort of whip some life into it. And since I'm going to apply very thick, it is okay that it's a little more thick than most glazes would be. I mean, you can almost not apply too thick. It really, really lifts up when it's thick. I think this is going to work well. So for the small bowls, I'm going to start glazing them inside, pour it out, then I'm going to glaze the outside, then I'm going to leave them to dry, and then I'm going to do the next glaze. Just put it around. And again, because I like this glaze to be very, very thick, there's no rush. I can just float it around, and then when I think it's covered well, just pour it out in one go. And of course, I don't want any big drips hanging on it, but something like this, I know is working well. I'm going to do the same thing with the other bowls. I'm not too worried about reaching all the way out to the edge, because I am also going to dip it, so that's going to be covered. If there's something hanging, you can just wipe it off. Again, you don't want any big drips, but smaller ones for this glaze is okay. And then the biggest ones of the small, that was the inside. And now for the outside. The foot that are trimmed comes in really handy because it's a handle. I can hold on to this, and I don't want to glaze that area anyway, so I'm just gonna dip it in up to the edge of the foot. That's it. Just try and roll off the drips. It's okay if there's a little bit of extra glaze on the edge, that's fine. That's it. Just want to wash my hands in between because I don't want to get too much glaze on the rim. And the last one. Oh, it just about fits. This is a little more tricky because it's so big, but I think it was almost too big for this, but I think I saved it. Yeah. So now no, I can't make any bigger bowls for, at least for dipping. So that's it. And I'm just gonna clean the table. It's always good when you do glaze work to keep cleaning your table, tools, and so on, because you don't want to accidentally put a pot with a very clean bottom and put it on something that's polluted by some other glaze. So trying to keep things clean, and I always use newspapers to put it on. So again, trying to avoid getting any of it polluted. Now I'm just going to wait until it's dry enough to touch, and then I will do the inside of the foot. The big bowl, I will basically do the same way. So inside, I'm just going to pour around the glaze, pull it out. But on the outside, you see, it doesn't really fit my pot. So I'll do that in a different way. But let's start with the inside. As I mentioned when I was doing the waxing, I actually want to have some glaze on the inside of the foot. And to do that, there are many ways you could do that. I mean, I could have dipped the whole pot in, but they're almost too big to do that in these pots. So another way of doing it is sucking up some glaze in this. I think it's actually medical for like blowing water into your ears. But I'm not using it for that anymore. I have a different one for that purpose. So I'm just going to suck up some of the glaze in this. Don't need that much. I'm just going to apply some of it in here. And float it around a little bit. I don't want it to be too thick. And now that I have it, I'm just gonna clean off at least some of it, and I'll do the final cleaning after it dries a little bit more. Just like all the other pots I did, it's important that you clean up the foot, first of all, because you don't want it to glue to your kiln shelves. And in this case, I also want the rim, and I want the edge here to be as sharp as possible. So it pays off to spend a little bit of time doing that. Also, the next layer of glazes I'm going to do is not going to touch the bottom. It's going to be on the inside a little bit on the top here. So I can just as well finish the foot now. So then when I finish the other glazes on top, the pot will be done. To apply the glaze on the outside of this bigger bowl, as I mentioned, I can't dip it. I'm not going to do any more spray glazing. So we'll go back to pouring it with my band wheel on the big bucket down there. And it will, I hope, be much easier than the fermenting crock I was doing, because this has an outbound surface, so it should be a lot easier. I'm trying to place it so that it spins sort of equally around. I think that's good enough. Then I'm going to fill my pitcher, whatever you would call it, with glaze, trying to not to spill too much. And then I'm going to just slowly turn it around. Just going to keep spinning it a little bit so I get it dripping out and down sort of evenly. And I think that looks good. I think I may need to dip a little bit here. I will clean my beveled edge, so I don't care if there's a little too much. I will clean that up. So I think that's good. I will do the initial cleaning of the edge. It's sort of a little bit easier when it's wet. And again, I have this bevel edge that I can guide my cleaning with. Of course, now down here there could be some drips. I won't know before I turn it around, but as I mentioned before, it's very easy to scrape off big dips and even it out with your fingers. And if there's some empty areas, I can still, dip that and fill it out. It's going to be good. And again, this glaze is okay that there's some variations of the layer, because it just gives some nice variations to the color. So I'm going to let it dry a little bit more before I do anything. Now it's dried, and as you can see, not surprisingly, there's some part of the edge that is not glazed well enough. But that's easy to fix. I'm going to dip that. And besides, there's going to be more glaze on top of this, so it's not a problem. So instead of my finger, because it's relatively a lot, I'm going to use a brush. But I'm not going to actually brush it. I'm just going to like splash it or dip it on. Yeah, I don't know what you call it, but it's going to be like this. And probably going to do it twice, because I want it to be thick on the rim. It's going to run for sure, but it's fine because it is on the rim. There's plenty of space for it to run, so no problem. The next glaze I'm going to use is the A2 or Heath A2 White. It's a wonderful glaze in itself, but on top of the floating blue, it just flows really nice into it. And that's what I used on this re-glazed bowl that I showed you before, that I'm trying to replicate. So I will use that again on the inside, not all over the inside, but in the middle of the small bowls and the big bowl. And the big bowl, I'm also going to add it to part of the outside. So let me just mix it up first. It's a nice and easy glaze to work with. It doesn't settle too much. So yeah, and it's easy to apply, and well, it's just really nice glaze. Adding the white will make it a little bit more runny. So I'm just going to apply it to the upper part of the bowl. I'm just going to splash it a bit around. I'm not going to be so concerned about how equal it's applied. It may look a little bit crazy now, but it's going to be good. I hope. It's been before. But I'm not going to stop here, because I'm also going to add some washes on top of the glaze, which is something I've been experimenting with, and it can create wonderful things. Most of you probably only use washes under the glaze, but you can put it over the glaze as well. So I'm just going to do some splashes. This is the copper carbonate wash. And this is a cobalt wash. You have to be a little more careful with that, because it is going to make things very runny. And I actually prefer to do this outside because, well, you can see the way that I'm using it. I'm splashing it around, so it can be a little bit messy. So now I have to let this dry. I even had a little bit spot there of the copper carbonate. It's going to be interesting. But I kept the rim, the foot rim, clean. This looks a little bit crazy now, but I have a very strong feeling this is going to look really good on the final pot. I will let it dry just a little bit and move on to the small bowls. For the small bowls, I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to add the white on the inside, and I'm going to put it in. I'm just going to turn it around a little bit and then let it dry. I'm not going to add any white on the outside on these ones, because I have another thing. I have a third glaze that I want to add. So let's start with that, because I just want it on the inside here. And I'm going to use the brush to try and, add it up the sides a little bit, so it becomes like, sort of like a star pattern. And that's usually good. And I'm going to do that on all the small bowls. And be careful not to put too much glaze in there, because you can't pull it out, because then you're going to get it up over the sides, and I really don't want that for this sort of application. So it's better to put a little bit too little, because you can always add some more. I'm going to use a brush again. Oh, there we actually got it up the sides a little bit more. That's okay. And now I want to do something that is sort of tricky, because I'm going to apply some of the steel wool powder. And what I found the first time is that it actually takes very, very little. And this powder is very, very fine. So I should have added it while the glaze was still wet, but I'm still gonna try. And it's just gonna be very, very little, something like this. And I think that's gonna be enough. I may want to just freshen up the white, so we have something to glue it on, like this. And so again, very little. Now the big bowl is ready. And look at this. It's gonna be so interesting. I really love this. I'm gonna do basically the same thing here. So I'm gonna pour some of the white in, turn it around, and let it float out. I'm gonna add a little bit of the black steel wool. See? And then some of the steel wool. I think that's enough. Maybe a little bit more. I think that's good. Now, to top it all off, I'm gonna add some oxides. First, a little bit of the cobalt carbonate. And then a little bit of the cobalt. The other one was copper carbonate. This is the cobalt. And since this is on the inside, I'm not so afraid of how it will run. So I think that's it for now. But I'm not gonna stop here because I'm also gonna add some of my Temmoku Gold on the rim. I already made some tests this summer where I tried all these combinations, and I know that Temmoku Gold on top of the Floating Blue will create a beautiful dark edge up there. So I'm going to do that. This Temmoku Gold, there are many kinds of Temmoku Gold or Temmoku glazes, but this particular one is called Temmoku Gold, and it's very high on iron. I think it's 11% iron or something in it. As you can see, it is very red, and it produces a fantastic range of colors from dark black into golden yellow, and it's a quite amazing glaze. I used it on its own, but it also blends really good with the two other glazes that I've been using here today. So to kind of frame the bowl, I want to create this dark edge that runs into the white middle with the steel wool powder. It's gonna be interesting, at least. To add this to the edge of the small bowl, it's gonna be quite easy. I'm just gonna hold on to the rim and give it a dip. Just a few seconds. I'm gonna let it drip off. I don't want this to run inside the pot, so I'm gonna make sure that all the dripping is done before I turn it around. But it dries pretty fast, so that should be fine. So, something like this. I think that's gonna be good. I'm very excited. I'm always very excited when I do glazing. I'm not. And then when I open the kiln, I'm really nervous, but I think this is gonna be good. Now I just have the big bowl left. And of course I can't dip that. So I have to use a brush and be very careful just to add this to the edge. A little bit on the outside and the inside, or just on the edge. It's a little more tricky, but I think that's gonna work okay. Then I need to sort of turn it. It's not so easy, but I'm gonna have a few drips that runs into the pot. I think it's gonna be okay. It's just gonna create another sort of variation. See, this is why I like to have a newspaper on my table, because this glaze is super strong colored because of all the iron oxide, so I don't want that to be splashing too much around. The only thing left now is, of course, to dry them before I put them in the kiln for the glazing. And I may want to consider adding a little bit of the of the copper carbonate and inside some of the board. So let me just do that for a few of them at least. Just a little bit like this. And maybe also a little bit of the cobalt. Just something like that. Not too crazy, but still crazy enough to be me. So this is a nice way, and I made another video where I did a lot of this layering of glazes and oxides. I also use them under. This is a great way to take glazes that are not unique. I mean, the glazes I'm using here, you can find all the recipes. I did some minor adjustments to them, but nothing really big. I mean, you can basically replicate the glazes I have made here. And I'm happy to even provide the links in the description. Those glazes are not a big secret, but this will make my pots very unique, because there's no way you'll be able to apply this exactly the same way that I do. I won't even be able to apply the same way next time. So it's a very, very good way to make your pots stand out unique. Of course, depending on what kind of washes you use. This time I'm only using cobalt and copper carbonate washes, and how you make the washes, of course, it can turn out a little bit different. Last time I was also using red iron oxide washes and some zinc. This time I'll just stick with these two. Now I'm gonna let it dry completely, and I'm gonna put it in the kiln. The rest of the pots are in there. I'm gonna start it before I go to bed, and in almost 2 days, I hate that waiting, but in almost 2 days it should be done, and of course I'll show you the results. Now it's time to open the kiln, and it's always so exciting. I sort of feel like a kid on Christmas morning, or if you're in Denmark, we actually open the presents at Christmas night on the 24th. And I always found myself a little bit lucky to grow up here and be able to open the Christmas presents a few hours before. Poor American kids have to wait until the morning. Anyway, not talking about presents now, but my pottery. It has been fired, and now the temperature is about 100 degrees, so it's safe to open. It's probably still a little bit too warm to take out. I know I said this a million times before, but please wait until you open your kiln. You could open it at 200 or 300 degrees centigrade. Some people do that, but it will put some burden on your heating elements, and they won't last as long. So I encourage you to wait. I usually wait until 100 degrees, maybe a little more. I open it a little bit, put something in there, and then I let it cool down below 100 degrees. You won't be able to touch it anyway, so please wait. Just get used to the fact that it takes 24 hours, 36 hours, something like that, for your kiln to cool down. So now we can take a first look. Whoa, whoa. This is very exciting, to say the least. It comes out almost exactly like I expected, which is, I would say, sort of unusual. Wow. Wow, this looks really, really good. Now, as I said, it needs to cool down a little bit more before I can actually remove it, but it's safe to remove. It's just about 100 degrees, so it's a little hot to touch, but I will get the first layer removed and get down to the other layers, and we'll take a closer look at other results. I'm excited. All in all, I'm very happy with the results, as you could probably see when I opened the kiln. I often fail. I do a lot of experiments, and when you do, you fail. But failing is kind of like a necessary step on the way to success. And I know that sounds a little bit cheesy, like some sort of self-help book, but it is. I mean, if you never experiment, you never fail. If you never fail, you never get something new. And the result of this is a lot of experimentation. But I think the way that it turned out was exactly what I was looking for. Even the foot, if you see the foot. And remember, I waxed my maker's mark a little bit so it stand out. So that is actually not so glazed. And this is, in my mind, beautiful. And what I didn't do before in this combination is adding that Temmoku Gold on the top. And it shows maybe even more on some of these pots. It adds that framing, so to speak. So we have the light and goes into the blue, and then it ends up with this black area and frames it. A funny thing though is that on the outside you see this is also the floating blue, but the Temmoku Gold, when it floats into the blue, it becomes white. And I can't explain that, why black and blue turns white, but it does. But it creates a beautiful ocean-like flow, and the inside is just perfect. The only thing that didn't come out as strong as I was hoping for is the steel wool powder that I added. But I was afraid to add too much, so I deliberately added very little. I will try next time to add a little bit more. But the first time I used it, I added so much that it came out these crunchy, crusty, not so pleasant surface. But this could be a little more. If you look at, let me just take the ones that are re-glazed, it's actually not that far away from it, but there's a little more of the steel wool powder there. But all in all, I think all the bowls are just wonderful, and they all have the perfect song. What didn't come out perfect though, and there's always something that doesn't succeed, is the plates. The plates are nice, but as you remember, I did have some problems with the application. It was a little bit too thick, it gelled up too much. I tried to deflocate a little bit, sodium silicate, it was still a little bit too thick. I tried to even it out, but it actually crawled a little bit here. It's still a usable plate for my own purpose. I could re-glaze it and have it melt out a little bit more, but that is not perfect. After I deflocated it, it did turn out a lot better. But still, it's getting a little bit too thick, and then it turns a darker green and sort of like a crystallized green, and I don't like that. So I think I need to lower the specific gravity on that glaze. That shows also on the big fermenting crock that I did. I think this is, this is not crawling, but there are areas where I think it shows a little too much that I didn't pour it all over the pot equally. It would definitely have been better if I spray glazed it, but this is functional, and I think I will let that stay. The fermenting crocks that I did, also, as you remember, I sprayed them outside in the dark at night, at the winter. It's not the ideal condition. So it could have used a little more glaze here, because inside you can see there was more glaze and it turns almost completely white. And so if I glazed it a little more, it would have had more variations of the color. I could add more glaze to it and refire it. That would be perfect. You can also see on the lid that I dipped. It got a few seconds in the glaze, and that actually make it turn out much more interesting. But I think all in all, still a good pot, and it's got that sort of wood-fired feel to it that I love about this glaze and this clay combination. Also, the bamboo vase turned out really nice. And here you can really see how this glaze breaks and form different colors from almost white all to a dark brown. And there's no crazing, there's nothing here. And you can see over the edges here how it highlights it, because it breaks over there, becomes thinner and dark. And I think this is beautiful in my mind. So all in all, I'm happy, and I hope you are too, and I hope you enjoyed this video and got inspiration to do some great glazing yourself. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel. Next Sunday I'm gonna have a new video. Comment, share, whatever you like. I'll try and answer as much as I can. And I hope to see you again next Sunday. Have a good day.